if you have high-rise buildings but you don't have clean air, you don't have healthy people, you don't have proper drainage systems, so you don't have flooding, you have people living in poverty, that can't be development. And you have different measurements of development. The point is that we cannot frame development strictly as GDP or this is the economic benefit and ignore all the other things that are a part of it. My name is Theresa Rodriguez-Moodie. I am an environmental scientist and the CEO for Jamaica Environment Trust.
If you weren't doing this, what you do, what else would you be doing?
Probably working as an environmental consultant. This is what I was doing before I came to Jamaica Environment Trust. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of variety in the types of projects. Yes, I did work on environmental impact assessments, but I did a lot of other types of projects, like climate vulnerability assessments. And I did like the challenge of the variety of projects. But I didn't feel like I was making an impact, and I've always wanted to feel like, not just feel, I've always wanted to make an impact through the work that I was doing. And so this is why I've ended up here. But I think that I would always be in the environmental space.
If you were to compare your time in the other sphere and compare it to where you are now and the challenges in the now, do you regret making the move?
No, I don't regret it. It hasn't been easy. It really hasn't been easy. And I think actually when I told people that I was leaving from environmental consultancy and going into environmental advocacy and NGO, I had a few, are you crazy? It didn't seem like the right fit. People told me, oh, you have such a sweet personality, maybe advocacy is not for you. But I honestly, I didn't see it then as a problem. When I did start, I had to make some adjustments. I'm just used to writing reports, liaising with clients, liaising with different government organizations, and then coming into this new world of advocacy. It's almost, for some, at times it's almost kind of adversarial. And for me, initially I was like, I don't want to get people upset, but I realized more and more I got into the issues and I spoke with communities, understood their environmental concerns, the issues that they were facing. I realized that this is something that I had to do. That JET had a long-standing reputation of doing good work, working with communities, advocating for change, and this is something that is needed and necessary. And if I'm not going to do it, if JET is not going to do it, there are not that many people that are willing to do this kind of work.
When you had the raised eyebrows, the are you crazy, type leaving from one to the other, how was the are you crazy explained?
It didn't seem, and this was not from the are you crazies weren't from my family. It came mostly from folks that I was working with. They didn't see that transition for me because I was doing well in consulting. I was also doing work regionally, and it just was something that I didn't see for me. But nobody really knows what goes on. Of course, I enjoyed doing the work, but I just wanted to do something different. I enjoyed those kind of projects that really had me interacting with communities. And this is funny because I am a physical geographer.
Oh, okay.
I did not. I chose physical geography because I really didn't have any desire with working with people and communities. You know, physical geography is very. I spent months in a lab, sieving sand, counting species. I had no interaction with people for example, when I was doing my PhD, and I was quite happy with that.
Yes.
But I realized that I took great pleasure in doing work that I saw where people were actually benefiting from the output, the outcome.
Do you get the sense that Jamaica is listening to a jet at the community level, the NEPA level, the governance level?
I think we're being heard in some way. So I wouldn't have been around that jet when we started in 1991. But having had conversations with our founder, Dana McCauley, she would tell me that when JET started, if you said the word environment, if you said the word climate change, this is not something that was on the tip of people's tongues. They probably would laugh you away.
And they probably did.
And they probably did,
Yeah.
right? I mean, she has been called many different names. And I see how many years later, when I joined JET in 2021, a different landscape. Of course, you see some of the same things, some of the same issues that JET has been advocating for years. It's still there. But I think we've come a far way because I think people have a greater appreciation and understanding for the environment. It's not where we want it to be, but I think people are not laughing you off anymore. There is a greater appreciation for climate change and the impacts and why we need to be adapting and so forth. Is it where we want it to be? No. I think that we are heard, but I think oftentimes it's more often seen that we, the environmental professionals, the environmentalists, and whatever bracket you want to put it, are anti-development just because we are supporting the environment.
Yes.
And that's just a false what's the word? It's a false narrative. Just because I want to see the protection of Jamaica's natural resource, just because I want a healthy environment, that can't make me anti-development. It should not make you anti-development. What it means is that what we have been advocating for is when you look at development, it cannot be this or that. It cannot be, well, we want these hotels, so, something has to give. No, it has to be, when we are making decisions, let's put the environment, let's put people at the center of those decisions so that they are not the losers, because too often they are the losers. How do you define development? Right? Some people, and I've heard it said, development means tall buildings, concrete. That's what marks is a measure of progress. But is that truly what we want development to look like? In my opinion, and in the opinion of many, development should not just solely focus on that. If you have high-rise buildings, but you don't have clean air, you don't have healthy people, you don't have proper drainage systems, so you don't have flooding, you have people living in poverty, that can't be development. And you have different measurements of development. The point is that we cannot frame development strictly as GDP or this is the economic benefit and ignore all the other things that are a part of it. And then the second thing is that when we talk about EIAs are, and this is one of the things that we actually recently had a conversation with them about. Is there anything that you can find that says this type of project requires an EIA? No. There are no actual, at least publicly available, there are no actual guidelines available to us that will say, okay, this type of project requires an impact assessment, this type, because basically, I'll explain. If you were supposed to approach, say, a World Bank or an IDB, they have special guidelines. So let's look at IDB. IDB, for example, says that we have different categories of projects. You have category A, B, and C. So a project that may have minimal environmental and social impacts, category C. You don't really need an EIA. You don't need an EIA, but you do need some form of environmental assessment. But it's not at the same breadth and depth as an EIA.
Right.
A category, and so it goes.
Right.
Category A, and it also has to do with the type of impacts and whether or not they're reversible, irreversible, if you can manage, mitigate, you know. So a category A project is a kind of project that is a much larger project that basically has these major negative, has a potential to cause major negative, maybe positive as well, but we're focusing on the negative because it's about if they're irreversible.
So, right.
And if you can manage them and if you can mitigate them. And if you've answered no to a lot of those questions, basically you do an EIA.
Right.
So what you're right when you see there, we have a lot of projects that we see being approved, for example, the Pinnacle. That is a massive development that did not require an EIA. It did require some form of environmental assessment, but the point is that in the Jamaican context, you don't have that level of guidance to say, oh, this type of project doesn't, this type of project. And what does that mean? That you have discretion. That agency has discretion. And you know what happens when there's discretion. That's problematic. And so when we talk about environmental, proactive disclosure of environmental information, transparency, these are some of the things that are important. And all of this kind of comes under the ESCAS agreement, which is something that we've been asking for the government to ratify. We've signed it, but not ratified it. So those things are very important.
Were we to ratify this agreement, would it make accessing information easier?
In theory, it should. So you have the Access to Information Act, but you understand how challenging this can be to use. I mean, we have had so many issues. We heavily use Access to Information Act because a lot of the information that you think should be proactively disclosed is not. So, for example, you have a river, Rio Cobre. I'm going to use Rio Cobre as an example. This river is something that is used for multiple reasons. Domestic, irrigation, and recreation, right? Primarily. I should know the kind of water that I'm swimming in. The community should know,
Yes.
right? Especially because there's all of these different discharges into the river. You already know they should be monitoring it.
Yeah.
And even if you don't release the information regularly, daily or whatever, depending on your test, I should be able to go on your website and access your, however frequently the data is recorded. Well, I can't get this. You have to do an Access to Information Act request. And this is the thing that we see with a lot of, so if a project did not do an EIA, you have to make a request because only EIAs are publicly available on the website.
So let me just get this.
Even permits, sorry, my apologies.
Yeah, no, do that.
Permits which set out the conditions under which a project should be implemented. And it says, for example, the project proponent should not exceed, like noise levels should not exceed, should not work at this time period. Now, what you see is on the front of a building, you will see the permit number, and the permit should be displayed. Once you have a permit from NEPA, it should be displayed.
But that's widespread abuse. That's not happening.
And you should be able to collect that permit number but their portal, I don't know if it's working now, but it hasn't been working for a while. But the point is you need that permit number. So if
you, Jet.
You, the individual, not just me,
Okay.
if you want to know what this project is being allowed to do or not allowed to do, you need to have the permit number to get this information. And what we are saying is things like that should also just be proactively given, like it should be on our website.
Okay.
With so
So in addition to being on NEPA's website, for example,
it's not on NEPA's website.
so it should also be on the building, the wall.
Well, a permit.
Not necessarily.
A
but-
permit is Well, I had this idea could be like you could scan the QR code because it's
Yes.
the age of technology.
Right.
So okay, you may just have the NEPA. The permit belongs to so and so, and they have been authorized to do this. The standard language that is there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could have the QR code. So if you want to know this project,
Yes.
because there are lots of people that will say, they call us, and I've heard the complaint, boy, this project is building so and so and so, and they're working on a weekend, and I don't think they're allowed to do this, but I can't find the permit conditions. I don't know if they're allowed to do this. What are you gonna do? You can make a request, and you may or may not get a response, or you'll do an ATI request, and you have a 30
days.
you have to
And
fill out the
30
form.
days, yes.
And not everybody knows how to do this, and
Yeah.
it's very simple, but not everybody, this is not what they do. For some people this is not as easy. So just simple things like that. If we were to ratify the ESCASO agreement, I hope, well, again, we sign all these conventions and it doesn't necessarily means that you have a gun to your head that say you have to do it. But you've made a commitment that, you have to, you do certain things. So we've had a meeting, we have written a letter, written letters and so forth, made some suggestions about what we think, at the very least, what we consider like low-hanging fruit
Mhm.
should be considered. If you want to have greater transparency, greater public engagement, these are some core elements of ESCASO.
Does JET know the list of companies that dispose of its waste in Rio Cobre?
We made that ATI request and we didn't get it.
That's still outstanding?
Yeah. They partially responded to the request. So we wanted to see the number of companies that are either have discharge permits or whatever. And you see, the thing about it is you also, sometimes you don't know if it's how you make the request,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to be so careful with how you craft your request,
Mm-hmm.
the language you use, and that one was not. And we followed up, but we did not actually go the full route on it because we've made a lot of requests for specifically with respect to Rio Cobre, and not all of them we've been able to follow up. Some of them we're going to
Yes.
go back and try again with the language.
So,
And this is the thing, you see, if a lot of this information was just publicly available,
exactly.
I mean, would you have need? I mean, I'm saying that obviously there are some things that you would probably need to still keep with the ATI and have an ATI officer. But every striking thing, I think it would make their lives a lot easier. The law with respect to enforcement is very discretionary. So this one thing we've been arguing is you should not have the same level of mercy, if you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
on a repeat offender as a first-time offender. But the law is not phrased in that way. The law basically says, here are the different options that you can exercise. You have enforcement notice, cessation order, the whole long list. You can revoke their permit, you can suspend their permit. Now, how it has been explained to us is that once a company gets a notice to do either they have a breach of permit or whatever, and they address that, it's almost like the clock starts over again for them. So they are not necessarily, they don't necessarily have this thing as repeat offenders in there, as I understand it.
But isn't that opening the door to get them off the hook?
Right. It's in my view, in our view, if you have an organization that repeatedly, for whatever reason, it could be, I'm not saying it's on purpose,
Yes,
but
I understand.
for whatever reason,
Yes.
either discharges or does something illegal in the environment, then the discretion here should be that you take stronger action.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. But that's but I think that if you need any kind of amendment in the law, it should probably address that kind of gap.
Because I'm thinking that some of these repeat offenders ought to be shut down. I mean,
Harsher, they should have a harsher permit.
yes,
I mean, they should have a
harsher
harsher
penalty.
a penalty.
Yeah.
And it can't just be the fines, because
Which is,
at the moment it's nothing.
Yeah.
And I know that there's been a proposal, the Prime Minister has made a proposal to amend, and I'm not quite sure of the timeline because I don't think that was announced at the same time. But yes, the fines are going to be significantly higher. But then you have to go through the whole process of taking it to court,
yeah, but
because it's a criminal matter, and the 2019 pollution incident for Rio Cobre is still
Yes.
before the courts. The 2019, 2021, 2022 is still before the courts. The 2022 will be heard starting July 29, I think, and the 2021 will not.
July 2029?
Sorry, July 29,
Oh, okay.
2024.
Okay.
The 2021 case is not going to be heard until next year, January.